Okay, cool. Okay, I called to the stage the third panel of the day and the last session of the day. First of all, I think that they deserve a round of applause. The presenters, the panelists, and the moderators, and especially you. You've gone beyond and above and beyond the call of duty by listening and learning. This last panel, if I could ask for your attention. Okay, cool. This last panel is a government panel. And what we're going to be hearing from is a combination of three levels of government: federal, provincial, and municipal, and one NGO that serves those and connects with those government agencies and departments, and one person from the private sector. So I'm going to first introduce them, and then I'm going to ask them each one by one to talk about what they do, what their agency or department does or company does, and what they do at that body. So from small to big, we'll start with from the City of Toronto, we Environment and Energy Office. We have Jack Bolland, who is the Program Manager of Public Energy Initiatives. Hold your applause. And from the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, aka MEGIC, we have James Thomas, who's the Senior Business Advisor. Thank you very much for taking the initiative. From the federal government, we have from Procurement Assistance Canada, we have Dolores Sui, who is a supply specialist. And from the NGO is called Plug and Drive. Many of you know about it. It's the EV agency that promotes the use and implementation of EVs throughout Ontario and Canada. From Plug and Drive, we have Dean Van Hoydenhoek, who's the office coordinator for Plug and Drive, and finally, but not any less than the others, we have from Fair Grant Writing, we have Igor Chigorin, who's the business funding expert for that agency. Okay, so why don't we take it from the top, starting with the City of Toronto, starting with Jack. Jack, can you tell us about what you do, what Environment and Energy does, and what you do there, please?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody that's come before me today. A lot of interesting conversations. Yeah, I'm from the Environment and Climate Division in the City of Toronto, and our job is to decarbonize the city by 2040, net zero city by 2040. Some of you might think of that as a mission impossible for any of these movie buffs out there. Tom Cruise is coming out with his 8th Mission Impossible, so I'm starting to think that these missions might not be so impossible. But yeah, essentially, the city declared a climate emergency in 2019, which really said we're going to go to a net zero city by 2040, 10 years earlier than a 20% reduction from the original 10 years earlier. So that means that the city, not only the city as an organization, but the city proper, the businesses, residents don't burn fossil fuels, or at least offset them in the next 15 years. I'm going to pull the room here. Is there anybody that can fancy a guess in terms of percentage on what the city as an organization, how much we account for emissions inside the City of Toronto proper? 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 90%? 30%? 15? So 3 to 5%. In our own operations, in the buildings that we run, and the fleet that we run, we account for 3 to 5% of emissions. My job is to go get the 95% that I don't necessarily own. 56% of emissions come from buildings in Toronto, 37% from vehicles, and the rest is waste. Where I spend my day-to-day is really on that new development side of it. So we oversee the Toronto Green Standard, which sets a pathway to net zero new development by 2030. It's a tiered approach to get there. It came into effect in its most recent form in 2018. We ratcheted up one level in 2024, and we will be going to our next level in 2026. Our forecasting suggests that for new development, the next version, you will not be able to burn fossil fuels in your buildings in order to comply with our Toronto Green Standard. So now you have to start thinking about a lot of the technologies that we've heard today. I'm responsible for the development of district energy systems or low carbon thermal energy networks at the City of Toronto. A number of projects I can go into a bit later. But then also too, we heard that conversation around materials, starting to layer on this conversation around life cycle analysis for the energy systems and buildings that we build. So yeah, I'll maybe pause there and pass it off.
Okay, so next you have James from the province of Ontario.
Thank you very much. James Thomas. I'm with the Ministry of Economic Development and other things, because the name changes by times when the government changes. And one of these things are not like the other. I'm not here as regulatory or policy, but the group that I'm with, there are 25 of us in the province between Windsor and Cornwall, and we all have areas. I tend to work on the western side of Toronto, and we are business advisory services. And we get out and meet the growing SMEs in our areas. We are sector agnostic, and we try to get to know what those companies' pain points might be, what kind of barriers there are to growth, and connect them with resources that can help accelerate their growth. Obviously, the ultimate objective is you started here, grow here, keep hiring here, keep fabricating here, and stay here. And I'd say about 3/4 of the companies that I deal with are manufacturers. There are some tech companies in there as well. And again, to use the word twice, agnostic, we connect companies with any sorts of support, whether it's federal, municipal, provincial, association, co-research projects and whatnot. So while some of my comments won't be directly related to sustainable energy, they sure are related to helping to grow a company. Thanks.
Okay, that's great, James. Next is Dolores from the federal government, Procurement Assistance Canada.
Thank you, Leo. I will be here. So today is just a great opportunity to meet everyone in this very exciting field to see how we can grow the green energy sectors. And for us as a federal government, my office, we are main focus on procurement. So when we start by doing the procurement, we're more integrated in green into our procurement process. They're more business, they're interested to sell to us as they want to get involved into the federal procurement market. So we'll be here to help you, to provide you knowledge on how you can get to this market, whether there is opportunity for you to explore. So that's what we're here for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dolores. Next, it's Dean.
Hello, I'm Dean Van Hooydonk. I work for a not-for-profit company called Plug and Drive. I have been an EV. I bought my first hybrid 20 years ago. But what Plug and Drive does is really get out there and engage individuals. We're a consumer-focused, customer-focused, not-for-profit. We really bring people in, talk about electric vehicles, what it's like to own, operate, talk to them about the finances involved in that. And the big part of what we do is we get people to sit in vehicles. Part of the sponsorship we get is we have a series of vehicles and people can drive. We've been primarily focused on retail. We've been moving into fleet organizations, helping rideshare and commercial vehicles, transport as well. We do this a couple different ways. We just got some NRCan funding a couple months ago, and we're launching a 24-city national program where we're taking this mobile coast to coast in 24 cities over the next 2 years. And from each one of those cities, we're going to be multi-road shows outside of that. So we're going to be hitting probably upwards of 80 different municipalities over the next 2 years. And that's just getting, we find there's a huge difference when somebody sits in an electric vehicle and realize it's not materially different from what they drive day to day, except it's quieter and usually cheaper to run.
Thank you very much, Dean. And last but not least, as I said before, or at least I tried to, Igor.
Thanks, everyone. Igor Shugin with Fair Grant Writing. At Fair Grant Writing, we help our clients to actually fill out the paperwork and write applications for all sorts of government funding, from all different levels. I've been with this company for 12 years and one of the original founders. And my personal role these days is to match our clients with the right programs, make sure that I know the client strategy, their projects in detail to make sure that we match them with the right program and that their application has the highest chances for success.
Cool. Thank you very much, Igor. My next question, and again, we're going to do a round table here, even though the table is linear. It's a linear round table. We're going to go around the table and ask each of the participants, each of the panelists, to talk about one hot issue, either on the government side of what they do or the energy side of what they do, that's on their desk right now. What is one hot topic? Starting again with Jack,
Oh, I get to
and then we
kick
have
off the
more
fun.
to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of already alluded to it already. In like, what we get to deal with is how do we build 90-story office towers to net zero today? It's a challenge, right? When the city, we are not only a regulatory body in that we have the Toronto Green Standard that's really pushing the envelope and what's possible around design, envelope design, fuel switching. The embodied carbon piece is really starting to play a role in that, and it's an exciting place. You know, a lot of people come to us and say, "How do you do it?" You know, there's approaches around district energy, there's standalone systems, and you have to run through the economics of what that looks like. So it is a very much a changing of the tides, especially for new development, and all the various stuff that we're looking at and how we build good buildings. I mean, I always find it funny, like when you talk about emissions, it's how we consume energy. 55% of emissions related to buildings are from residential homes. So it's where we live, it's where we work, and how we get between those two locations. And that's really the essence of this. So how do you start solving that from large development? So there's one project I'm doing down in the Portlands. It's the eastern waterfront. It represents 40 million square feet of gross floor area in Toronto's most precious land. And it has climate positive ambitions. So how do you do that? You know, we're running under a base case of full electrification. So you've already heard from some of the utilities that have been here today. That means we need to be investing in large generation assets. Or we can start looking at things like district energy and thermal energy resources, geo-exchange, sewage waste recovery. Some people might know about Toronto Western. It is the largest sewage waste recovery project. It's being currently commissioned right now in the world. We have another one that I'm working on at X-Place. We're exploring things like biomass. We're exploring things like deep geothermal. So drilling deep into the Earth's crust and going for a direct heat. So it's really, it's that kind of changing of the tides, and that what we used to do in terms of building, it's time for us to innovate. It's time for us to evolve. And it pulls us in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of different projects, possibilities on how we deal with kind of the conditioning of buildings, how we move in a city, how we plan for those types of movement. So it's not so much a hot topic as much, it leads in a lot of different directions around procurement, around embodied carbon of material selection, mass timber. But we're really seeing a changing of the guards in terms of design. Toronto is, in my opinion, a leading ecosystem for those types of things. You have really advanced architects, energy developers, real estate developers that are really looking to push the envelope. And it's fascinating. There's new technologies, new approaches, new business models coming to us every day. So it's fun.
Thank you very much, Jack. James, what about you? What's hot at Ontario Magic?
Well, internally they call it MedCat. I just call it
That's-
economic development.
Okay.
But I made some notes thinking about some of the things that were said earlier this morning. If I think about the kinds of companies that my colleagues and I have been talking to and working with, the ones that are really coming up more frequently lately in this space are architectural cladding developers who are doing energy, obviously energy use reduction, but also, solar panels integrated into architectural panels so that they can obviously supplement what's happening at the building itself with the storage and use later, but grid connecting as well to reduce local loads. So that's one of the hot buttons that I'm seeing amongst a number of companies, different sizes. Some of them are quite small, some of them are large. The smaller ones tend to pair with somebody else who already works in that area. I thought I'd just make an observation about something that was talked about earlier. There was some discussion about companies, the supplier end on procurement and pushing them to adopt sustainability efforts. What I see on the companies who are looking to adopt things, it's all driven by the dollars. They don't have the luxury to say, oh yeah, we've made lots of money, and so now we're going to spend extra and absorb that cost from our customers in order to do the right thing. No, it comes down to money first. It's always the focus. I met a new company yesterday late afternoon, and one of the small company, and one of the items in their production line is a dryer. It's an electric dryer. And he complained. And I said, well, how's the cost? And he said, well, it's pretty damn expensive. And I said, well, what are you looking at, something new? And I was expecting to hear, oh yeah, there's a great different kind of dryer. And he says, no, we're good. We want to go to a gas dryer. Okay, why? Well, he said the electric dryer only costs about $10,000. The gas dryer is going to cost about $100,000. But he said it's faster, it gets a better product. It has lower error rates. And so we need to find solutions that are going to offer companies like that options that don't drive them on to using fossil fuels, right? You're trying to drive their choice. So I think it's really important for companies, if you are wondering why am I not getting uptake, or associations, find out why. What are the drivers? Look at the strategy of what you're doing and make sure you're positioning it attractively to the market. That's some of my comments.
Thank you very much. Dolores, do you have anything that you want to talk about in initiatives?
Right. So as a federal government, we're the largest buyer in Canada. Each year we buy about $37 billion worth goods and services. Many things happening. So we're in many areas, we're trying to integrate green into the process, also trying to make the procurement itself see life cycle assessment, try to see whether we can achieve better environmental impact through our capability. So two things worth to mention, like we have a flagship 25 Sinclair building finished. That will be our exemplary building retrofit for our future government facilities renovation in the future. So that's one. And another is just before I came, like Bosie, my colleague, and I, we talked to our headquarter policy group to understand what they're been working on. So one of the things worth to highlight here is we have this new called Green Public Procurement Tool. Green Public Procurement Tool, GPPT. So this tool is very new to federal government in Canada. Be qualified in that green category in order to be put in the database. So that's something very new. Would like to everyone know. So if you have a company, you could take a look whether your company can put into that database. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dolores. And Derek, what's new at Plug and Drive?
So one of the biggest things we get engagement from customers, particularly those with the sustainability approaches, they come and look for EVs, is the battery sustainable? Am I going to be replacing it in 2 years? Is it going to go to the dump? What about all the minerals that go into it? And I mean, from a practical perspective, the EV batteries in the cars produced today will last the life of the vehicle. We're looking at every vehicle manufactured has got 8-year, 160,000 kilometer warranty on the battery, the inverter, the motor, which is longer than anything else on the car. But that's just the warranty. Real life, that battery is going to last. Testing says there's no reason it can't last 15, 17 years, 800,000 kilometers, 500,000 miles. And that's not, we've just seen the first EVs break 1 million miles on the original battery. Because they've been around. It's not new technology. It's been around. The second side is look at the whole life cycle. Yes, there's minerals and the mining that has to go into those minerals, lithium, magnesium, nickel, iron, that have to go into those batteries. But from a practical perspective, that's mine once, and then it's in the battery, and the batteries are actually recyclable. There are companies here based out of the GTA who take the lithium-ion batteries, recycle them, recover 95% of the components. So these things aren't going into a waste dump after. The other piece is, before you get to recycling, you were seeing the range drop about 15% over a decade on an EV. If that range isn't good for you, resell it to somebody else. They're fine as a shorter commute vehicle. And when you're talking a 500-kilometer range, 15% is what, 60, 70 kilometers off that? You're still able to go more than 400. It's not materially different for people. The second part is I heard a lot of discussion here about putting power walls in for supporting storage of electricity. The batteries out of these cars can go into it. There's a project in Phoenix, I believe it is, that took 1,300 old Tesla batteries and used them to store energy from wind and solar. So, I mean, your reuse, repurpose is there for these EV batteries.
Very good, very good. Again, Igor, not the least at all. What's new in the world of grants, for government grants, the other government levels?
Well, especially in this for this audience, probably the best news that I can bring is that there are now federal government tax credits available for both purchasing and manufacturing clean technologies here in Canada. And the list is quite long, but if I can summarize it, if you, as a company, as a business, purchase, say, solar panels or batteries or zero emission vehicles that you use in your facility, for example, not on the road, but within your facility. So all of those activities qualify for 30% rebate via CRA, Canada Revenue Agency. And the way these rebates work is that you apply at your fiscal year end with your corporate taxes. And then if you don't owe any money to CRA, you get 30% cash back into your bank account. If you do owe, and sometimes it happens, then they will just reduce the amount of money by the balance owing. And the other side of this coin is, again, if you are a Canadian company manufacturing those solar panels, let's say wind turbines, batteries, etc., etc. So if you're retrofitting regular vehicles into zero emission vehicles, or by the way, if you are also extracting or processing critical minerals, you could also qualify for 30% rebate on those activities. If you're purchasing, for example, equipment to ramp up your production, 30% of the cost of equipment will be compensated. So this is a pretty significant step forward compared to what it used to be, because I've literally every year I used to get the question, where are the solar rebates? Where are the rebates for solar panels? Why don't we have them? So now finally we do. And those are federal, so they apply to companies coast to coast.
Cool, thank you very much, Igor. Now we're going to do the short and snappy questions. These are going to be directed to individuals, and some of them are pre-screened, not all. So starting with Jack, can you give an entry-level introduction to the Toronto Green Standard, what it is and how it applies?
So the Toronto Green Standard is essentially Toronto's version of building code. As I mentioned, it sets a pathway to net zero new design, but it incorporates a number of different metrics that the city identifies as priorities, especially in a changing environment. Where I spend my day to day is I focus on, I hunt GHG elements at the end of the day, and there's three metrics that we focus on when it comes to new design in buildings. It's your total energy use intensity, which is how much your building consumes, whether it's appliances, lighting, EV charging. It's your thermal energy demand intensity, your TEDI. Basically, how leaky is your building? The science behind it suggests, try to get your TEDI as your buildings as airtight as possible, and then fuel switch to low carbon electrified solutions, district energy. And the one that I focus my day to day on is GHGI, your greenhouse gas intensity. That's how much you are using in terms of fossil fuel based technologies. You'll never actually get to zero on that one, unfortunately, if you look at the policy, because the grid's not perfectly clean. So until we get to a perfectly clean grid, we actually don't get to net zero. So we do have to offset. But there's a number of other initiatives as well that are related to the Toronto Green Standard around stormwater management. So being able to retain a certain amount of stormwater after 72 hours after a major event. There's things around bird-friendly glass, permeable pavements, green roofs. So there's a list of environmental considerations as it relates to the Toronto Green Standard. And it's really about building buildings that we can live in, that can live in harmony with the environments where we're building them. There are some incentives I should mention, and Igor can touch on them, associated with it. So again, we have a minimum standard of what you're required to build to today. The City of Toronto is required when we go to develop, we're required to build to net zero today. So we are leading by example, but there's a minimum tier. If you go beyond that minimum tier into the voluntary tiers, there are some financial incentives. There's development charge rebates. If you connect into things like district energy systems, we have a program at the City of Toronto that allows you to repurpose mechanical penthouse space for its highest misuse. So you can put amenity space up there, or you can put penthouse space up there. But basically what it does is it frees up a lot of mechanical penthouse by relocating your energy systems in the basement through heat exchangers. And then we do have some financial programs as well to really try to push the envelope. It leverages the city's cost of borrowing to really push the agenda on net zero new design. So maybe I'll pause there. One thing that I do want, and I think the mineral conversation is so interesting and I want to mention it, but we're now starting to explore this idea of embodied carbon as it comes to buildings. The voluntary tiers do require reporting on embodied carbon. But can anybody guess here, what most buildings, I'm going to say this, most buildings that we build today are made of concrete and steel. Concrete, wildly pollutive, not wildly pollutive, but very pollutive entity. It is the second most consumed commodity in the world. Can anybody fancy a guess at the number one consumed commodity in the world?
Water.
You took the thunder away from me.
Uh,
Yeah, water, right?
And the thunder and the rain.
Yeah, in the rainstorm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, water. I mean, like it's hard to think that we can actually build the systems that we want to build. Toronto, fourth largest city in North America, fastest growing in North America. We're outpacing New York. So we're going to have growth demands, decarbonization demands. It's hard to believe that we're going to be able to get away from concrete for a lot of this stuff. So where we're trying to push the envelope along with the feds is this idea of low carbon concrete. How do we start bringing that into our procurements? How do we start bringing that into buildings? I talked about high performance new development. If you build the embodied carbon conversation load, if you build a low performing building, so a building that is very leaky out of mass timber versus a very high performing building out of concrete and steel, it takes 40 years for the life cycle carbon to actually equal itself out. Because in a concrete steel building, you're so far in the black from day one because of the resources you're using to actually build the building that the operational efficiencies are decades long in order for those to balance out. So it's a very, that part of the conversation is rethinking design, rethinking how we build, how buildings operate, how they can trade energy is going to be really fundamental for us leading forward. And the Toronto Green Standard is really the lever that we can use, and other municipalities for that matter too, in the GTHA. The STEP code in BC follows a very similar kind of approach to decarbonization. It's a very useful political tool to really incite innovation in the industry throughout, whether it's the operation of buildings or the actual buildings of buildings.
Cool. Thanks, Jack. James, can you tell us a little bit about what you're hearing from the SME sector that you serve about their green and sustainable energy initiatives?
I'm not hearing too much about them other than what they're trying to do is reduce cost. And that's really where they're going at. So the general, if we want to talk about the consumer industrial level, so those companies who would be consuming these technologies, I find a lot of them aren't as well tuned up as to what's available, even things that might be very advantageous specifically for what they're doing. They really are, paying attention to managing their orders, managing their staff, and looking at cost reductions. So that often has to be the entry, I believe, for a lot of these technologies. I wonder if I could talk a little bit towards some of the support things that Jack and Igor mentioned. Now, those ones are hitting directly on incenting companies to adopt these technologies. I sometimes focus on the companies who are producing those technologies. So the ones who are trying to sell it and get it adopted. And I think a lot of the times those companies need to get outside of that lonely little echo chamber that they might have, which is talking to everybody about sustainability and technology, and work on growing the company, which could often include things like support for IP development. A lot of companies don't run into that until they've got a major client or a major RFP they're responding to, and they can't answer things like IP. I think companies need to get going on those things early. Other items that I think are important is if a company's not getting uptake in Ontario or Alberta or anywhere in Canada, then don't ignore the other markets that are right there. And there are lots of supports to help companies build exports. Companies often don't know what to do with that, and part of it is data driven. There's lots of support. I've got strategic industry people in my ministry who have information about what's happening. I have trade commissioners in other areas. Ontario just opened one in Singapore, and we have Canadian trade commissioners as well. So there's lots of information there. If a company starts to go and ask and say, this is what I want to do, how do I get there? And I think that's really what needs to drive a lot of those companies. Don't just complain that, oh, the regulations aren't there, we're not getting enough incentive for our uptake. Find your market, and that market might not be right here.
Thank you very much, James. Dolores, can you tell us a little bit more about how to connect with the federal government's green purchasing initiative?
Thank you, Leon. So first of all, I'll just quickly just tell a little bit about my office. We are built just to meet the requirement demand from the private sector. They would like to work with federal government. They're interested to this market. So our office was more like we're part of the acquisition branch. So we are be there to help you to understand how federal government procurement system, how that works, and to provide advice. And we have those free seminars, free trainings, and also one-on-one consultation based on your company situation to see whether potentially you can sell to us. So that's what we do. So in a way, first of all, we make sure it's open, fair, transparent to everyone. So for us, we're in Ontario region, we're in our regional office within Toronto, and we have offices across Canada. So if you happen not within Ontario, we can connect you with our regional office at different region to help you if you're interested to see whether you can think about whether you can sell to us to do a little bit explore. So yeah, so that's how they can help you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dolores. Question, this is going to be, we're on our last 3 minutes, so we're on our last pass. So Dean, can you tell us a little about EV charging options for apartments and condos? And if you want to extend it to retail, you could do that too.
Yeah, I mean, so EV charging, one of the other big complaints outside of whether the battery is going to last is the charging network's not there. Most of the people, particularly the early EV adopters, live in homes, have their driveways and stuff. They have a level 2 charger, and that allows them to charge overnight. They do 95% of their charging at home. There is a network of over 20,000 chargers across Canada, and it continues to grow thanks to various funding from various levels of government and local initiatives to make them available. But the big gap in that network is the multi-unit residential, your apartments, your condo buildings. Particularly, the older the building is, the harder it is to upgrade. I was just talking with somebody here earlier today, and they had just put 40 units in their building. The building's about 25 years old. They actually did it purely on an economic basis. The resale value of those units went up because sufficiently to cover the roughly $5,000 cost of putting those units in for that group. So there is economic, but it's getting the landlords, the property managers involved, and then there's the local utility engagement as to making sure the local feeds can support those additional units. So it's not necessarily an easy transaction, and it's very building and location specific. You're really at a need probably in an apartment building with 50 to 100 units. You might have 5 or 6 people with an EV today. So that, you know, they don't have a majority. Vancouver just passed a law that if all they need is a 50% vote at their condo board, and they have to make EVs available, EV chargers available. Those are the kind of changes from the municipal or a local level that can help push that forward, because for the EV drivers, it's difficult today. But a lot of it, so what's their alternative? You can't do it at home. There's public chargers nearby. City of Toronto has done a great job of on streets where they don't have driveway parking and garages. They put chargers on the street so that they're available for the local residents or visitors. That's a program that can roll out. Then there's other ones in parking lots, retail, shopping malls often have free chargers. Not the quickest way to charge, but it's available. Workplaces are another alternative for drivers. If the employer puts it in for their workers, most people drive less than 50 kilometers a day. So a 400-kilometer battery is going to last them a whole week. They really only need to charge at work once a week. So the number of chargers an employer or retail needs to put in doesn't need to be one for one in the parking lot. The last part I will mention is a lot of people don't realize the basic 110 socket that you use for your phone or your fridge works to charge an EV. Northern Ontario and more northern Canada have plugs in a lot of their parking spots because they used to have block heaters, and they still use block heaters. That doubles as an EV charging station. So, you know, not very common here in Southern Ontario, but going further north. So there are options. It takes a little bit more planning if you don't have that where you park every day.
Thank you very much, Dean. And the last question of the day and last question of this panel, before we say some well-earned thank yous. Igor, can you talk perhaps about the SHRED program? Because many of the people in this room are involved in developing technologies, hardware and software.
Yes, absolutely. So the SHRED stands for Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Credit. So it's yet another tax credit, but its focus is on fostering developing technologies and new products. So if you are the company that is developing a new product in Canada or improving the existing product in Canada, then a portion of your costs, labor costs and material and contractors' expenses that you spend on that development or improvement may qualify for the tax credit, and the amounts range between 60% on labor, 40% on material costs, and 30% on any of the Canadian subcontractors' expenses. There's literally no maximum amount of this program. You do have to qualify. You have to prove that your development process matches the definition of research and development. You have to make sure that you have proper record keeping, that you have people's hours allocated towards your R&D project, and you have certain protocols, evidence of R&D, evidences your failures, etc. And speaking of failures, your project does not have to end up with success, right? You can fail and you still qualify.
Okay, well, thank you very much to the panel. First, I'm going to start off with a thank you that only I could do, because the person who will follow me can't. I want to thank David Katz, the chairman of the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association, who did the heavy lifting in creating everything that you experienced today. Thank you, David. Secondly, we heard about embedded carbon and embedded energy. I want to say that there in this room are embedded members of our board hiding amongst you in the table. So for Yuri and Dr. Zhu and everybody stand up who's a member of the board to take a little bit of recognition for the hard work you've all done. It doesn't happen by itself.
We need more members. We need more members. Go to join, hit the join button. It's $100 for small business, $1,000. We are rebuilding an association. We need diversity, so we're asking for diversity on our board because you saw a bunch of old guys stand up. So I'll speak to her now.
Yeah.
And she is a champion for bringing women into this business.
Okay. I want to say a couple more thank yous. I want to say thank you to Andrew, who, if you saw any magic happening on the screen, that he created that PowerPoint and helped us direct our energy to get here today. Thank you very much, Andrew. Andrew Halford. We'll get there. And Kayo Pashawal. Thank you very much. Take a bow. Young, dynamic, brilliant, and helped us to make this happen, partly because he's actually a millennial, so he knows about technology like my kids. Last but not least, Wendy, who's not in the room right now, was the woman who opened up the session this morning, but also the techs at the back of the room. And my future son-in-law is a tech, so I can appreciate it. Those faces don't land up on the screen by accident. The sound doesn't sound perfect by accident. The lighting is not by accident. Everything happens because there are technicians and technologists that make it happen. And as you know, from the coffee, from the refreshments, from the hospitality, from everything, Wendy and Jonathan Hack, who's the head of research at Centennial College, who did the land acknowledgement, have done a yeoman's amount of work to make this happen and to make this success. We all owe them a big round of applause. And David's going to take one more minute to get you to join our team.
Thank you, Leon. Okay, this ends the formal thing. Thank you, panelists. In the interest of time, so we said it ends at 12:30. We have the room. We have exhibitors. It's up to you. You're welcome. Make sure that you had if you got a parking ticket going into the lot, make sure you have a voucher. I'm told by Wednesday you put the ticket back in and then you put the voucher in and it opens the gate for you. We are, as I said, rebuilding OSEA after many years. Many of our members are in Canria and downtown tonight, actually, or yesterday. We're not taking anything away. We are the trade association for the small and medium size. We're not going to try to take on the $6 billion long-term RFP from the IESO. As you heard from Bob Willard, it's about these companies. I respect the Ontario gentleman saying it's about saving energy. Many of these small buildings, they leave the lights on when there's nobody there. There's wasteful energy. Many of them say it's because the landlord owns the building, but they pay Enbridge and they pay Toronto Hydro, etc. I worked with Igor just recently on the Green Industrial Manufacturing Fund. And literally, in order to get the grants, as he and I know, they now ask for an energy management plan. So if they're going to give you, as we're doing with one company, like $1 million to get new equipment, but he has not changed his lights. And so when the feds are giving money, and I think Dolores even mentioned it, it says, we'll give you the money. Oh, by the way, do you have an energy management plan? Because if you have an energy management plan, which you can get funded by Enercan under the ISO 50001, etc., you have the ability, as somebody said, people are making products, they're making customers happy, they're running their system. But their buildings and their warehouses are wasteful. And there's ways to save money, whether it's things on the indoor air quality that's going to save you money, whether it's making your windows better, whether it's controls from our friends there, whether it's solar on the roof. These are the things that we're going to bring into OSEA, which initially was just about the feed-in tariff, put solar on your roof or build windmills or biomass. That was the previous version with the incentives and feed-in tariffs. We are now want to be the concierge for everything sustainable energy. So please join us at OSEA. We're going to have webinars. We have a history of webinars on our website during the pandemic through the generosity of people that did one on multi-res buildings, did one on the greener homes, did one on renewable natural gas. And so I'll close there. We have the room. We welcome those that can stay, those that can leave. Please join us. Give us some feedback. This was all done by volunteers. Thank you so much. Reduced it by like 60%.